A mass shootings sometimes seem like a weekly event, and what hasn't changed is the need to support victims and their families after all the attention fades. Joining us now to discuss how their organization, Victims First, offers direct help for mass shooting families and the communities that experience them is Anita Bush, president and co-founder of Victims First and key co-founder of the National Compassion Fund. Anita, thank you so much for coming on with us. Can you talk a little bit about your personal story of how you got involved in this mission?
Sure. 10 years ago, my cousin was murdered in a mass shooting in Aurora, Colorado during the midnight screening of A Dark Knight Rises in the theater. And then years later, another family member, Stacy, survived a mass shooting in Las Vegas at the Route 91 concert by running for her life under a hail of bullets. So this is a very personal mission for me.
Oh, wow. I mean, two of those events, I mean, touched you so personally, then you were in a position to know full well sort of what type of support that family members and people left in a community need long after the media coverage has faded away. So can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, what type of support do you provide?
We provide direct, immediate financial assistance. We find resources for the community and for the victims themselves. We provide guidance behind the scenes. Preferably, we always work behind the scenes, helping communities organize for the best interests of the victims. Everything from, making sure that when they do meal trains, that the victims' addresses are not put online for all of America to find. And also, security at funerals. It's a bevy of information, actually, that you can find on victimsfirst.org.
And you're actually talking to me right now from Uvalde. I mean, can you talk about the work there? I would imagine that this support could start immediately and then probably last, I mean, for how long are you in these communities helping?
As long as we're needed, as long as it takes, and even after, like you said, the cameras fade and the cameras go and it fades from the news, we are still here. We are still there as a safety net to provide any kind of support that is necessary, whether it be for the catastrophically injured or for financial resources. We help the community through it. We tell them what to expect and how to organize. And for the victims, we've helped so many families here stay on their feet financially. We also encouraged a centralized victims fund, which they started, and we are so glad about that, because after a mass shooting, when people give, oftentimes it goes to nonprofits and the victims never see those funds. So.
Yeah, and so then you guys have a centralized fund that you can just use for this mission, is what you're saying?
We have a general victims fund that's used for mass shooting victims across the country. And from that, we are helping the Uvalde victims out of that general fund. In addition, we started a fund for all of the entire victim base in Uvalde, and we've collected 7.156 million, I believe, so far. And we're still collecting. People are still giving, and that will go into a centralized fund, and that where everybody's pooling their funds, and that will go out to the larger victim base of anybody who applies for the funds who needs help from that victim base.
Got it. So people in those communities apply for it and state their need, and then the money is given out, dispersed that way.
It's not done by need. It's for long term, yes, by need, but for short term, no. It is just given straight to them as a cash payment directly to them as the public intended. And they can use those funds any way they want to cope and manage their trauma in the only way they know how, and the only way they know that they need. Every family is different, so we acknowledge that.
In 2018, here in our area, we had the Santa Fe High School shooting where 8 students, 2 teachers were killed. And we do stories on the anniversary of that. But how can we prevent re-victimizing people who are already victims of these tragedies? I mean, you never know if somebody wants to talk about it, wants to revisit it. But how do you deal with that sort of re-victimizing issue?
Yeah, I think language is very important. I mean, some people will say, talk about healing for families of the deceased. There's no healing that takes place. There's a managing and learning to cope with the hole that's inside of your body and your soul from a family member being ripped from you or a generation of your family just being destroyed. Also, I heard you say anniversary. A remembrance or a year mark is a great way to talk about that. And for families of the deceased to say that their child was lost, it's not like a set of car keys. Your family was murdered, your child was murdered, stolen, taken. It's preferable language. Also, like I said before, when somebody wants to, there's so many generous people in this country. So when you want to give, just make sure that the donation that you're giving is going to what you intended. And that is, if you want to give to the victims, that's great. If you want to give to the community, just make sure that wherever you're giving, it's actually going to its intended purpose.
Yeah, and on that note, how can people help your mission, and where can they go for more information or to possibly donate?
Thank you for asking that. Yeah, we could use the help. With this rash of mass shootings that has just happened in this country over the past few months, our General Victims Fund could use some help. Like I said, 100% goes in, 100% goes out. It's on victimsfirst.org, and we also have an administration fund for when we are called to places and we need to get to places to help victims and communities. That's what we use. We work for free. We use those funds for our operating costs. So if anybody wants to help us help other people, boy, we'd really appreciate it.
They'd go to your website.
Yes, please, victimsfirst.org.
All right, thank you, Anita Bush, president and co-founder of Victims First and key co-founder of the National Compassion Fund.